1, 2, 3.
Good
Monday morning!
How's it going? Today I am in Stockholm, Sweden with two very special guests, MPJ from Fun Function and Isa. Would you like to do a quick intro on who you are to my beautiful subscribers?
I'm MPJ. I run a YouTube channel called Fun Function. It's about JavaScript. Started out being about functional programming, but it's also about creativity and productivity and basically staying happy and productive and excited about your work as a programmer.
Important stuff.
So I'm Isa. I do a lot of talks and conferences around the world. So basically I just talk about performance and machine learning and whatever it is that I'm interested in learning at the time. A few very dear topics to me is functional programming, which speaks a lot to the channel, and optimization and web performance and how that plays out in different societies and different countries where data plans are limited. And nowadays I work at Isa here in Stockholm. I'm relocated in January. And also working about how to make financial and payment systems more accessible to the masses.
Awesome. So I wanted to interview them too about things like how they got into tech, what are their challenges that they're facing right now, as well as just some other fun questions that I've come up with. So let's get started. So I thought we start from the very beginning, and I wanted to know, how did you two get into programming? Tell us your journey.
Ooh, origin story.
Yes.
I'm actually I actually have a theater background, so I have a background in theater and TV production. But during my school years, I was really interested in memory techniques. Memorizing the first 100 digits of pi and memorizing the order of a deck of cards. And I just realized that I found a lot of websites about it, and I then realized that I wanted to create websites about it, and I just learned this horrible thing called PHP nuke, which was sort of like WordPress but atrocious. But I learned how to do minor modifications on that, and eventually I just learned that I really have a knack for this, and I really find this really exciting and fun to work with. And then I just gradually started doing it more, and then it just turned into this thing that I did.
So did you work as a software engineer for a little bit, and then you started the YouTube channel, or how did that work?
Yeah, I after school I didn't really know what to do, so I started an e-commerce company. I was selling button badges. I basically coded our e-commerce system from scratch, because Magento and stuff like that didn't exist at the time. And that's basically my education in programming. And after that company tanked. It turns out I'm very good at making money, not so good at managing money. And I started working as a consultant, which eventually led me to relocate to Stockholm. I ended up working as a consultant there, which I hated, and eventually jumped around a couple of times until I ended up at Spotify. Worked there for 4 years, and then I started the channel, and then that took over in time, and what I needed to hey, this is big now, I need to decide if I should do this or Spotify. And I decided that no, the channel is the best way for me to exploit my skill set in my time.
So Isa, how did you get into programming?
Yeah, for me it was not glamorous at all. There wasn't any deeper meaning or calling from the skies and said, you know what, code. But for me it was more like a parachute kind of thing. Because back in Brazil, education is actually very ironic in the sense, because you have public and private. Usually private's much better. But there are a few set of schools, public ones, that are very good. So there was a school that I wanted to get in for high school. And they were public and very nice quality, but in order to get accepted into that, you had to do like a technical course as well. It was mandatory. So I managed to get in the examination, and then I had to choose one thing. And back when 13-year-old me, had no idea what I even wanted to do. Like, it was kind of a hard thing to just ask a child, even like a teenager. But within the set of options that I had, I just chose informatics back then because, oh, you know what? I spend a lot of time on the computer. Perhaps I can do something with this. And I obviously had no idea what the course even was. I never actually knew what programming was. I just thought I was gonna, like fix some computers or like subtitle films. I don't know. I literally had no idea. Turns out I really liked it. I started learning like C at the time, and that was actually very fun. Just like seeing all these things happening in the terminal, the black screen, and then you just pop something in the terminal and things happen. Like I did dozens of calculators and then linked lists, so whatnot.
That moment in programming is really like magical
It's
when
really
you first
magical,
learn it. Like I
exactly.
almost forgotten about that when you just like first craft things and they appear on screen.
Exactly, and I never, after that time, it's hard to get the same kick as you got when you were
That's true.
first learning how to program.
Yeah.
But then I just fell in love with it. So I just followed the whole career path. I went into university for computer science, eventually dropped out because I just thought that, well, I really liked the things that I was studying, but that wasn't it. Like, I didn't fit in the whole classroom scenario. So I started working with research at the time, doing machine learning algorithms to predict text, back when the whole iPhone thing that we have wasn't a thing. So we used like Markov chains and a set of other things to make that happen. Then migrated into backend, started learning Java and all sorts of things, and then I just figured about this whole web programming, web development thing. And then I just really fell in love into that and just started like building web systems and web interfaces, and that's what I do until now.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like a love story, but not a very calculated one.
Calculated one, right? Because you made calculators.
Oh yes. Oh well. Work on
the
work.
waves. It's
All
not
right.
legal from making bad jokes.
Yeah. Let's just let the waves drown out the dad jokes.
So we talked a little bit about that first spark that you get when you first start programming, and everything seems like magic. You two have been coding for a long time now, so I wonder kind of how are the ways that you found how to rekindle that spark? Like after coding for so many years, how do you find that moment again where you're like, this is awesome, I just coded something really cool?
Yeah, for me it comes mostly when I'm like delving into unknown territory, which is like the easiest way to get that going. Or when you have like, for me it comes a lot when there's like a problem that I at first have no idea how to solve, and then I just get my head around like knowing all the tiny details, assembling everything and putting that into a package. But I think most of the trajectory and the success of a developer kind of depends on how to get that spark alive, because otherwise I could just fall into the trap of knowing exactly what you're gonna do from the start of the day to the end. You can just basically know, oh, this is gonna happen, this is gonna happen, I'm gonna tackle this kind of problem that I already know how to solve. So for me, it takes a lot of exercising and like getting to know new things, and like, for example, I kind of achieved that by getting to know Clojure, because it's a completely functional language. I didn't actually need that for my work, but I just kind of chose to, you know what, let me grab this insanely different way of thinking about code that I wasn't at first used to, and that kind of lit it up for me, because then I can understand that, well, the joy in learning new things all the time is still here, and that spark that, well, I can think in many different ways. It's still there. For me, it just takes something new to start and explore that.
Yeah, I think the novelty part speaks to me a lot. I actually we did a completely non-programming thing a couple of months back, where like I wanted like a little physical habit tracker in order to like make us like, I'm trying to learn Portuguese and Isa trying to learn Swedish. So I want like a little box with flip switches that you can track one for every day, you know, like and like nothing electronic about it or anything, just like a little box with click. and that was so fun building. Yes, reconnecting with, like, I used to build a lot of these little things when I was a kid. But yes, like crafting something that you didn't quite know how to do, or at least it was so long since I did it, that you just had to figure out, oh, what if we do this and this and this and this, and then like, how do you use a bandsaw again? Like that was so much fun. I didn't expect to have that much of a blast building something that simple, but it was just outside of my normal zone, and that just sparked something interesting in the brain.
And I think that kind of speaks to a different thing, which is just to see the result of what you're building right before your eyes, which for me was the first spark. Like I was coding all these set of like ifs and else's and all these like different commands, and just seeing it run on the terminal interacting with me was like making fire all over again.
Yeah.
So like for me that was the effect. And then when you build something that's physical, that's also right there. Like you spend like 1-2 hours building like little parts, and then you just see the whole thing.
I love that metaphor of making fire.
Yeah.
I always loved fire when I was a kid. Like I burned so many things.
MPJ a fire maniac.
Yeah, for sure. But it's something like about the thing where like you build like the fire, you construct it, and then like you just set a little spark to it, and then it just like comes to life.
Yeah, totally. I love the way that you two have talked about like having your curiosity lead you to the places where you can get that spark again, because we talk a lot about learning new technologies and how to stay relevant as a software engineer, but I love that you two have found such an organic way to do that in a way that feels like who you are as a software engineer, so that you do keep enjoying coding, basically.
Exactly. But what is your strategy?
Honestly, I think it's something similar. I think about a year ago, I started picking up kind of like Arduino stuff. And I'm not like a hardware person at all. Like I stay away from that stuff.
I want to so bad do this. Like I'm afraid of Arduinos. How did you push past your fear?
Well, so Scott, sitting behind the camera, electrical engineering major here. So
I
have a little bit of a leg up in research.
Nice. Yeah, nice.
Yeah, because so when things start working and I'm like, why isn't this light blinking?
Exactly.
I'm like, hey, but it is frustrating.
Yeah.
But it is that like when things come alive in a physical space, which is really like an electrical engineering thing, it's so amazing. Like, I was just trying to get like a little servo motor just like spinning.
Yeah.
And when it was spinning, I'm like, all this thing is doing is spinning. But I'm so happy.
Yes.
Exactly.
I
I
totally
did
get
that.
it. Yeah.
It's just electricity just making the thing spin.
Exactly.
Yeah, I definitely agree with like just finding new things, finding new technologies that work in different ways that you're not expecting, and just really like almost getting obsessed with that problem of getting it to work in such a small way.
Exactly.
Almost makes me like appreciate the little things in code where it's like, sometimes you want to make a really big system that's fancy architecture, and other days you just want a little servo motor to just spin.
Exactly.
I think there's something to be said about like that when you say obsession. Like sometimes I get so caught up in like making meaningful things, like thinking about like how does my work fit into like the world holistically, and then like it becomes like this almost like existentialist trap.
Yeah.
And it just ends up like if you follow it too far, it just becomes depression. And sometimes it's just very nice to just enjoy, a meal or like a discussion or in the present, or a fucking little motor that just like does what
or
you.
A blinking
yeah,
light.
yeah, exactly. And
that's
just
so
like
true.
and you're just like, oh, this is amazing.
Yeah, that's so true. I mean, I think I talk a lot about on this channel about how to make an impact as a software engineer. And there are really big impacts that we can make, but at the end of the day, like a lot of the stuff that we do is little bits of problem solving to get us there.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And really getting curious about that problem solving, you can really kind of lose yourself in a delightful way, which I think all of us, as well as everyone else out there, really enjoys that kind of just like, I don't know why I so want to solve this, but I do.
Exactly.
Yeah.
There's something about this button that I want to figure out.
Why is in the corner around it?
Oh, I love that
Exactly.
so much.
Yeah.
I don't know why I want to solve this, but I do.
Yeah.
Oh, that's so cool. That's t-shirt material.
Yeah.
That is. All right, so now I'm wondering, also, like, kind of more on the career perspective as well as just like what your day-to-day is like. What are some of the challenges that you're facing now as a software engineer and in your work?
I actually, like, for me, it's been since I'm doing the YouTube channel full time now. I'm kind of like finding myself missing like the team interactions a lot. So like that has been like a surprising boon apart like living with you, because sometimes Isa comes home and like it's so frustrated over something like, oh my god, this thing happened at work, and I know I'm gonna like, oh yes, like when I hear it, because I don't get any of that. And like when you're in it, it's like frustrating, but like once you're outside of it, it's a super fascinating problem to like see how software teams interact, and how the kind of like the overlap between software engineers, because today software is built by such large teams, so that means that like only like perhaps like, I don't know, 30% of time is spent coding. The rest is spent like interacting with other programmers and figuring out how how to write code together and how to build software together.
Which also touches my biggest challenge, which is definitely people. Like I think after you've been like a software engineer for years and years, you kind of learn how to your way into code, right? Like there's very few things that are actually challenging in the technical sense. I mean, obviously, if you're dependent on what you're building, but I feel like my biggest challenge nowadays is just how to get people to coordinate and everything that revolves around people. Because often, like something that you're building that is like an effort of a whole team, not just of engineers, but with designers and product owners and whatnot. Like the whole challenge is how do you get people to be on the same page, first of all, to communicate needs, to feel safe enough to say, hey, I have a problem, I need help with this. And that for me is the biggest challenge of how can I be a part of something that works better, because the team is just feeling so in sync and so open and just can work together. Because ultimately, like in my company, Izettle, like there's so many people from ridiculously different backgrounds. Like I come from Brazil, there's people from Nigeria, there's people from Russia, and all these people have like very specific types of communication. And like how do you put all that together and make people just understand each other and not be offended or not be thinking that they're like being underestimated, or and that is the most tricky, interesting thing I've ever done so far. Obviously building shit at school and like playing with Stack is nice, but ultimately for me this is like a really infinitely cool challenge on how to get people to cooperate.
Yeah, because I feel like more than finding like the right technology that's going to solve all our problems, solving those communication problems and empathizing and talking about how you're going to work together has a lot more, like, can provide a lot more benefits than finding like the right technology. Because if you do mesh with your team well and you figure out how to communicate with each other well, then there's so much more that you can do. And finding out what to solve, how to solve it in a really good way that accounts for everybody's opinions and perspectives, you're going to make a better product, and it's going to be more fun building that way, I think.
Exactly, and just like a couple of like examples of things that you can actually solve and do better if you have like a team that is on the same page. It's like, how do you keep code from being duplicated all the time? Like sometimes you don't have people talking to each other when they're going to build something new, and there could be something already made that you could just like import and extend instead of just having to build from scratch again. You can have like people that can review code in a way more efficient way if they understand where this person's coming from, or if that's a decision that has been made before by the team or by someone else. And that reminds me of a very interesting dynamic that I had with a coworker not too long ago. So basically we were talking about code, and we were like talking about one of his PRs, and I thought the whole solution was a little bit over-engineered, and then I just asked, okay, but why did you decide to do something this way? And he was like, well, because of code quality. And I was like, aha, what is code quality? Like, this is not commonplace for everyone. And like for him it meant performance, for me it means readability. So these things you're never gonna understand and be on the same page unless you have a full conversation with people, and unless they are open to sharing their values with you.
That is so interesting. I'm reading Principles by Ray Dalio, and he is like talking a lot about how communication and interaction between people would be so much easier if people were good at verbalizing and communicating their principles to other people. because you could probably have solved so much of that communication problem much earlier if you knew where like the different values are coming from.
And yeah, after we had that discussion, like we just fine-tuned way better. Like I was better at reviewing his PRs, he was better at reviewing mine. So that's something that everybody just profits from once you get that finally corrected.
It reminds me that like I did this video a while back, an exploration on monorepos, because Spotify moved from like an extreme multi-repo approach to a much more monolithic repository approach during my tenure there. And I was vehemently like on the multi-repo side, and I like after a while I just realized that this is way better. And I realized that the multi-repo thing is something that developers often like develop because they don't want to solve their communication issues. So one of the comments on my video like was such a great example. He was like, I had this problem with a coworker, he wouldn't listen to me at all, I was and I really tried, so I eventually just started my own repo. I was like,
no, man, you're missing the point
yes,
here.
it was wonderful. And I mean, like, if you just imagine like what this behavior creates, if you have like an organization where everybody does this, as soon as you find this person that you can't reach, instead of reaching them or like removing them from the organization if they can't be reached, then that just means that the constant increase of people that are bad communicators or like they're just shoved off into different corners of their code base.
Sometimes bad communication can lead to like 500 different legacies.
Yeah,
so
exactly. It's like,
nobody wants that.
oh no,
Yeah,
this
exactly.
depends on library A and that's maintained by John. Let's let's just fork it. It's just like, yeah. So I think that like it's important to notice when you're doing something to hide your communication issues.
Yeah. So yeah, I feel like just working on a team as a software engineer means there's a lot of opportunities for conflict.
Yeah.
And as humans, we want to avoid conflict. We also want to avoid talking about our feelings and being vulnerable with each other. But a lot of the time, this is exactly the work that you need to do in order to do good work together as a team.
Yeah.
Oh God, yeah, I really feel like, I want to stay on that for a bit, like conflict as a means to growth. Like, because conflict is definitely an uncomfortable thing, but it is also a thing that we need, like we want to seek, because if we can find a way of having like a structured communication around our conflict, identify our issues, and work it out, that almost always ends up in both parties becoming much stronger communicators, developers, and also a more well-knitted team.
Yeah, exactly. Which I think also speaks to why is it important to have people from different backgrounds or genders or sexual orientation to work together on a project. Because like, if you get a bunch of people that just kind of agrees in the same room, well, you know what you're getting.
Yeah.
But when you have a lot of people that come from different places or have different opinions in general, then you're probably going to understand a lot more about things that you had no idea about, and that's probably going to come with some conflict or some things that you don't agree at first. But if that person is not there to like spring my mind with new ideas and new concepts, then I'm not going to grow. Then I'm bound to be like the same engineer that I was like for the last 5 years. So that's not what makes us great as engineers and as people. So I think it's definitely interesting to have those conversations, and for that to happen, obviously you need to be safe. You need to feel safe in the team, and you need to be confident that your opinion is going to be heard and respected, even if like the team doesn't decide to do your idea the way that you intended. But in order for people to share their minds, there needs to be like an emotional safety in the group, and that comes from communication and just being transparent and
I really believe that structured conflict leads to growth.
Yeah.
And we have a little bit of things in the software industry around this. Like we have retrospectives, which is kind of a little bit like that. We sit around and then we talk about positive things, and then we move on to like the negative things, and we pick a few of them because it's like now we're talking about them in a and we do it in a way that isn't around blame, but how like we can move forward. At Spotify, they had this thing which freaked me out in the beginning, which we call incidents, whenever a bug reached a user, that was considered an incident. And then you like had a special meeting for that, and like the destruction, like you created a timeline, what could have happened, and what could we have done, like what were the holes, and like what led up to this. And then you had like also did like a remedy, like kind of like an action plan for like remedying, making sure that this couldn't happen again. And it was very like focused on being blameless, or rather that the team took blame. Like nobody was allowed to take not a single, if a single person took blame, that was considered an error, because like there should never be a situation where a single person can make an error on their own. There should always at least be a code review where somebody else has approved it.
Yeah.
And that was really, really good. And I think that developing like communication structures like that can really help in making people feel safe in expressing themselves. And like, this is a problem, I'm vulnerable, blah, blah.
Yeah, on the business side, it's like risk mitigation, but on a very human side, it's just like having each other's back.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Feeling like integrated into a team of people that you're there for them and they're there for you.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that's true.
Having people that you can rely on and that you trust and they trust you to do what is best at that time. And like if someone fails, then like the fact that someone else can be there to pick you back up, like that's a great way to build trust and build those relationships. So you feel like you're a little bit safer and you're free to make mistakes, basically.
Yeah.
You do have to make mistakes in order to grow. Like that's, I think, the other thing that kind of goes hand in hand with conflict. Like you have to be willing to make mistakes and learn from them and grow from them. Otherwise, it's a lot harder to.
Exactly.
Yeah. All right, well, we talked about a lot of great stuff today. So thank you so much, MPJ and Isa, for being on the channel today. I will leave their links to their stuff in the description box down below. If you like these kinds of interviews where I talk to other people all around the world, then leave a comment down below. And like and subscribe as always, and we'll see you next time.
See you next time.
Bye.
That is sometimes the thing that you have to do in order to figure out water.
This is the behind the scenes of like shooting next to a water area.
Sponsored by
Water.
Exactly.